Here it is. The very big after action report for a very big operation. This one is going to be very long. So I'm going to start at the very top and work my way down. I will just give as brief as I possibly can because I have given this briefing so many times. The strategic level, the operational level, and then finally the tactical level as how the operation really played out. That's the contents of this presentation. So strategic overview, the big picture. This was the strategy which I came up with. It was based upon experiences that I've had on Baker in Wars 24 and 25. Reason being because those wars are very similar to the war we are fighting now. The server is dying, population is low on all fronts, morale is pretty much crumbling in most cases. Um, these are the really big factors which inform this strategy, basically, right? So you have the limited manpower, but as was the case in the last two Baker wars, we have tons of weapons and equipment because we overproduced, we overestimated how this war was going to go out. That's basically how it is. So the strategy was split into two phases, the defensive and the offensive. Now, for the most part, this strategy, uh, the entire first phase, the defensive phase, was pretty much carried out by my regiment, Recon Support Company, Buds, which supplied the majority of the armor and the manpower, and 33 AD tagged along for the last end of the defensive operations which we conducted, and I'll get into that here. Oh yeah, this is once again the main problems which inform the strategy. The queues were a big thing, and we'll come back to that later when we get to the operational level stuff. So everything was focused around bats and skirmisher, and the warden's equivalent, which at the time of the planning was Saltbrook and Maidensvale. All right, these were the two strong points that each side had, and our objective in the defensive phase was in all the territories in between our fortresses and their fortresses, we were going to just destroy everything and keep it that way. All right, we needed to destroy the defenses and keep it tech down. We were not going to commit ourselves to building up defenses in these territories. The conventional way of playing Foxhole is you take a territory, you build it up, you defend it from counterattack, and then once the enemy has counterattack, you counter the counterattack and move on to the next territory. And you do this until you reach the back lines, and by that time you will have secured all the victory points and have won the war. We can't afford to do that here because we don't have the time, we don't have the manpower to do so. So this was strategy that I drew up, and it benefited us. It was an advantage to us because a lot of people will be thinking if we do that, we also keep it tech down and defenseless. The enemy can exploit that. It doesn't work because we have the population advantage. We know this because of the casualty ratios, and we know this because of the queues. For those who don't know how the queue system works, a lot of people get confused in that the queue is there because it's reached the maximum limit of the population at a hex. That's not how it works. So each hex can have about 100 to 120 players per side, right? So we can have 100 to 120 players in a hex, and the wardens can also have that. However, there's an extra rule and algorithm involved, which is there to prevent a steamroll effect. At least that's what the developers say. I'm not too entirely convinced that this is a very, very helpful kind of game mechanic and rule. I'm not really convinced that it really works, to be honest. But that's the reasoning behind this algorithm, which I'm about to explain. Now, nobody actually knows what the algorithm is or what the full rules for the mechanics are. We can only make guesses, but we do know it exists. And it's basically one side can only have a certain amount of more players than the other side. All right. So if the wardens have about like 30, like I said, we don't know what the exact number is. But for the example, the argument's sake here, let's say the buffer is about 20 players. If wardens only have 30 players in hex, we can only deploy 50. And then after that, the queue starts for us. There's also the game mechanics of the priority. The priority mechanics and queues are there to help the logistic players, because when you have a full hex, you still need Logi running in and out, but if you just ran off the first mechanic, which I described there, where it was to prevent the steamroll effect, the logic player only needs to cross for a few seconds because he's just there to deliver the supplies, and then he leaves. So that's where the priority system kicks in, is to make the logistics players that running the frontline logi makes their lives a lot easier and keeps the front rolling, basically. Otherwise, it would have been completely locked out, and we wouldn't be able to get supplies in. There are certain ways you can game that mechanic. I know a couple of people have figured out ways. They keep like a shirt on their person, and then they walk up to the border and press, and the game thinks that, oh, this is a logi player, but it's just one infantry dude with a rifle that happens to have a shirt in his inventory, and he games the system, gets in front of the line, and goes across. That's one thing that I've found that was back on Able in War 98. But yeah, that's the reasoning behind the queues. Now I think I have gone off track here a little bit. Oh, yeah, I was talking about the strategic depth. So yeah, we have the population advantage. That is clear. The Wardens can't commit much manpower compared to us. So that's why the strategy of keeping no man's land is that it allows us with the population advantage to conduct maneuvers in territories. We have more manpower, and we have in our group that took part in most of these operations, they're all armor groups. So as mobile armor operations, if we can keep the playing field empty, that benefits us, because that's how we operate, basically. Mobile armor maneuvers in open territory. That's like the best sort of battlefield that we could create in our favor. So that was the first phase. The second phase was basically what this operation, specifically the main attack on Maidensville, was supposed to facilitate. Once the playing field had been set, it was then our job to start going in and start hitting the objectives. We don't need to concern ourselves with any large warden strongholds that weren't in the way of our fortresses and the enemy fortresses, because we could just bypass. The playing field was set, basically. We can maneuver anywhere we want. There's no reason to get bogged down trying to lay siege to a bunker base in the middle of nowhere. That was the reasoning behind it all. Now, I've tried to explain it, but I'll try to explain it again here. When we want to chip away at defenses, everyone agrees that this is what needs to be done, right? So far, with all the regiment commanders, whether we manage to tap the town base is not that important. So long as we can get around the defenses and just wear them down, so that later on we can have a follow-up operation to tap the town base. That's good enough, basically. I personally always try to push to go all the way to just tap the base. If we can just tap the base, then everything else falls apart. That's the way I approach, but not many people buy into that. But for the most part, chipping away the defense is important. What I see so far is that there's a failure of understanding of the game mechanics around what defenses are worth destroying and what are not. And we'll get to that later when I go through the target assessment of the damage we dealt to Maidensville. But for the most part, tier 3 bunker bases, that was what I tried to keep on pushing, was if we destroy that, they will not be able to replace. That is a very big thorn in the warden side if we do that, because they're not going to have the time, the manpower, or the resources to rebuild any of the bunker bases which have already been established. At this late in the war, it's not going to happen. And even if they do try, we can always revisit them the day after with a very small raiding party and hit the concrete when it's still wet. It's very possible to do. So that was the point around this operation, was in that phase to start hitting the victory points, start wearing down defenses, and start getting the ball rolling and seizing the initiative here. So here, the highlighted territories here were the territories which we prioritized in phase 1. So these were all the territories which, for the last 3 days prior, RSC and Buds went around and kept all these territories teched down, basically. If the Wardens counterattacked and rebuilt it up, by rebuilding, I mean they just rebuilt the territory and turned it blue. We'd then go back, hit it, and then tap it, and just keep all the tech down. We even conducted a larger raid operation in Deadlands, which we pretty much stalled the Warden offensive there. They managed to attack into abandoned ward and take it. And we swung around behind, cut off all the Logi, destroyed and tapped all the town bases, and knocked out all the storage depots. So any equipment and any progress they made in terms of base upgrades all got wiped out in that one raid that we conducted about 3 days ago. And since then, the Wardens have not been able to recover. An extra point to note was that 2 days ago, so immediately after this attack that we conducted, which was Buds, 33 AD, and RSC, a regiment called OGB went into Viper's Pit and tapped the town base. Tapped the town base and destroyed the seaport and factories immediately after. So what we're looking here is that Warden logistics in the center is very, very weak. As far as we know, Lokan Berth here in Callahan's Passage, due to the nature of it being a landlocked region, there's no way that they're getting really any effective logistics out of this seaport here. I mean, they'd have to run it by flatbed all the way from the back lines, which is now 2 hexes away here, all the way here to this staging ground, and then still maneuver by land the logistics to the fronts. So I highly doubt that there's any effective logistics going on here, which what makes Maiden's Veil very important because it's basically the last. At the time of the operation, Saltbrook was still operational, so it was one of these two main targets here that was holding the center and the eastern front, which make them very, very good targets to hit. Okay, so covered that, covered that. Okay, so this was part of these slides here were part of the pre-op briefing that I gave to the regiment commanders. Basically, I think at the meeting it was Buds, 33 AD, BTTE, and I think there was somebody else. I'm not too sure. For the main strategy overview here, I also gave in the briefing. So everyone, I'm pretty sure I explained the plan to. And the reason why I only explained it to the top guys is because if I were to explain it to everybody in all the regiments, all the way down to the tank man and the infantry dude, I'd have to give the briefing like 15 times at least. And it was my understanding that, well, the way I thought it would be, because this is how I conducted with my regiment. Once the information gets to me about what the big plan is and what the logistics involved and what the operational maneuvering is, I immediately relay it to my officers and they immediately relay it down to whoever's under the command. Now, probably I don't have any big problems because my regiment is really small. I mean, in this operation, we only moved in 6 guys, but 6 guys was all we was needed. And I'll get to the main battle, how we performed and how that went. But that was in my mind the way that I thought it would have worked out. It didn't, and we'll get back to that later on. The flow of information didn't quite go all the way down. So all the slides here and all the information, I tried my best to make sure that all the people that I thought needed to know knew. For the most part, the main campaign plans, the people that were first informed of that was Buds, USMC, the Orc fellas. I also gave them the campaign plans. And 33 AD, I asked Buds to relay the campaign plan to them. I'm not sure if that happened, but even if that didn't happen, they were here for the pre-op briefing that I gave, and I pretty much covered most of these. At least that's the way from my point of view, because remember, this is an after-action report. I'm telling the story as I saw it happen. I haven't really consulted with anybody. The rule that I have is that you're not supposed to. You do the after-action report just as how you remembered it, fresh after the battle, and then after that, you confer with everybody else that was there, and then try to get the story straight. I did end up breaking this rule for this after-action report. I was too disappointed and very curious as to what happened at the attack that I went over and asked people that were there what happened. But that's more tactical level, which we haven't got into. We're now at the operational level here. So yeah, that's all I want to say. So this slide here was from the pre-op briefing, and all the information here that you see was collected over a 72-hour period prior to the operation. It's basically me. Red also came along, and I believe Steel. These are the guys from my company. They helped out as well. But yeah, just for the most part, out of all the people that was involved, I'm the only scout that was on site at all three routes here to identify all the targets. that that's not the most ideal way to go about it. Usually, you'd want one of the field commanders to also have a good look at what the defenses are. But I think I did my job pretty well in that I I had a lot of video footage and I also had screenshots of all the defenses, and I tried to paint the picture as accurately as I can so that they didn't need to be there because they've got other things to do. But yeah, this was from the slide from that, and I made sure I counted all the pieces, what type of pieces they were, try to identify the route, and also need to keep in mind because as a scout, you're not tied down to the terrain as much. You can always drive the jeep in places that a tank can't get into, and of course, I can always jump out the jeep and go walking. So I made sure to keep in mind that when conducting maneuvers like this, that it's going to be a tank that's going to be doing the main operation. In this case, it was going to be multiple tanks. So I kept that in mind, made sure notes of all the terrain features. For example, the blue route here is only a single road. So that was a big piece of information. And the slope here for green route, Buds in 33 AD had conducted an attack prior 2 days before on this route, so they were familiar with it. The red route here was brand new, but this was one which I was confident that if we did try and take it, it was the shortest route to the town base. And there was plenty of room to maneuver to set up the tanks as well. But I'm just the intelligence officer. I don't have a say because I didn't make any of the tanks and I don't have command of any of the men. It's my job to present all the options here, and the field commanders make the decisions then as to how we want to go about it. But I probably should have voiced my opinion a little bit more about taking this route here. We had concerns about logistics, which was another problem, but considering how it went down in the end, I think it would have been okay to have gone this. But either way, it is it's a minor detail, I believe. We can discuss that later on if anybody else wants to talk about it, about which route to have taken. But for the most part, we had a very good picture about what the defenses were. This was the second target here because at the time Saltwood wasn't taken, and I managed to get a look at not only the western entrance but also the southern entrances here, and they were all pretty much undefended. There were at least pillboxes, a couple of pillboxes along the outskirts of the city, but other than that, there was nothing. The only main major block road was at Battle Landing here, which was the Tier 3 bunker base. And Saltbrook ended up being the initial target for the operation. Now, I was slightly disappointed because this wasn't part of the plan, partly because the plan was designed around all the regiments that were operating out of Drown Vale. What happened ended up was we got two other regiments that were operating in Endless Shore, and they got in on it. So, and their primary concern is going to be this bunker base because this is what's in between them. So at the time, I was a little bit disappointed. But then, as we went on and started doing the recon missions, just pre-op, I realized that it's still part of the strategy basically because this is a roadblock in their line of sight of operations here because it's now expanded. We now have two new regiments. So yeah, no real problems there. Just what I was thinking at the time. But yeah, this was the original target. But as we see here, this this was the last slide that I put in the pre-op briefing with all the major regiment commanders 3 hours before we conducted the operation. The second point here didn't actually factor in. The only intel that got outdated was the roadblock here on the southern road. They ended up getting it to partial activity, so some of it was active AI. But other than that, I think Recon Support Company did a pretty good job in providing all the intelligence for the most part. Everything was pretty much up to date, and the picture that we painted was pretty accurate for both targets, Maiden's Vale and Saltwood. But the last 2 points, the third point here, I even neglected. So in recon support, our after action debriefing, the comms we're gonna have to work on, but we really believe we have identified a better way to go about it. But it didn't really affect us that much, I don't think, because we were a very small unit. Uh, so any real problems we managed to get around in the heat of the battle. But the first point here, I'm pretty sure, was completely ignored by pretty much everybody. But I did raise it. I made sure to raise it. So this is not an intelligence failure. That's the reason why I'm putting this up here is that we did our job. uh, we we knew that we had the population advantage, which meant that the queues were going to be stacked on our side. And Endless Shore at this time, and also the day prior, I should say the evening prior, was already having queue problems. Same was also happening in Deadlands. The only major battle space that was not getting queues was Marvin Hollow. That was raised. And it wasn't that big of a problem because we identified that just as before we were mobilizing, so we switched targets. We'll get to that later on, but it was raised. These 3 points were raised. Okay, so we can get to the actual events of the operation now. And once again, I have to stress that this is all from the point of view of me and my guys here at Recon Support. I wasn't there for the initial siege. I did have a look, and since then, the rule that I mentioned earlier, I did break because I was disappointed and very curious. I did have a look at the footage, and I mean, if anybody wants to discuss the attack itself, I'm open for discussion there because I've had a lot of experience with armor operations myself in several wars prior. So we could talk about that. But for the most part, we're going to be focusing from how the battle developed from my point of view here. So, as I said, the primary target was the bunker base and battle landing because our allies, 2 new regiments that were operating in Endless Shore, the southern peninsula, they wanted it gone because that was in their way of their operations. And yep, right now in hindsight and the way that it turned out, I completely agree. This was a valid target to hit. Yeah, so what happened then was the queues. I mentioned it not only in that slide, but also as we were conducting the recon op into Battle Landing, we raised that again, and we finally did switch targets into Marvin Hollow and Maiden's Vale. So, ignoring the first part of the reconnaissance, Recon Support Company went in about 45 minutes prior to the main armor column to roll out. And just to recap what Recon Support Company does in an operation like this is what I call forward reconnaissance. And forward reconnaissance is the fight for information. All right, it's our job to deny the enemy intelligence and reconnaissance whilst at the same time expanding our own friendly intelligence and reconnaissance so that friendly forces are able to be more well informed and make better decisions, basically. And the way we go about doing this is that we run what's called a raid section. Now, I got really lucky that I got 6 people to show up. That's probably the most amount of folks that have, from my company at least, to have shown up for an operation like this to do the forward reconnaissance role. Because forward reconnaissance, intelligence and reconnaissance, these missions are very, very specialized. Not everybody is suited to them. And you do need to understand all the tactics involved because if you don't do your job well in this forward recon role, you end up being just a an empty space, a waste of resources, basically. Wasting manpower above all else. Because if you can't do the job properly, you might as well be better off manning a tank or just being infantry support or driving logi, right? Because manpower is like the commodity now in this game. It is worth its weight in gold. So I'm very proud to say, and I'm very proud of the guys that took part. That the recon support guys, they went above and beyond the Call of Duty here. Half the guys that came along for the recon op here were all pretty new, but they performed very well and they understood the mission and they understood our tactics very well. And what happened here is probably one of the greatest forward reconnaissance ops that we managed to pull off. We had 2 scout teams, so that's two-man teams in an Odyssey. And their job is to knock out watchtowers and build up watchtowers. The Odyssey can carry a lot of BMATs. That's one of the main strengths about it. And how we usually operate is that the driver of the Odyssey has a Katara machine gun, 50 cal, that's very effective at taking out watchtowers, and the driver is the dedicated spotter. So he has the binos, the radio. He's the one that's directing where to go, how to maneuver the Odyssey, because he has the extended vision from the commander's hatch in the Odyssey. So we ran 2 scout teams like that, 2 Odysseys with full man crews. And the last 2 fellas that were part of my company, we ran a Falchion. And the way we operate our armor is to be purely fire support. So any kind of armor that we operate is usually light to medium, so long as it's fast. That's what we bring. So we brought a Falchion. And so we went in ahead of the column about 45 minutes earlier, and we started knocking out all the watchtowers in the entire western peninsula here on Maidensville. Everything from Spitrocks, Maidensville, all the way up to Sanctum. Every warden watchtower along these routes we knocked out. With exception to the roadblock, because as I said, the intel got outdated, which we, being the forward reconnaissance, we went up, had a look. They got partial AI, so there was watchtower coverage here. But other than that roadblock, and other than the observation towers and watchtowers within the city itself, which we can't get to, everything else was knocked out. We knocked out everything, and we built up our watchtower network. And pretty much the plan that I had in mind was to cordon off. I can draw here. It was to cordon off this area here, because the route that was determined by the armor column finally was we were going to go up to here. We had to knock out Spitrocks because the wardens were actually spawning into it. They managed to get shirts into it. There were no active defenses because it was tapped the day before RSC went in and tapped it. So the only threat was that even though it's only infantry that's being able to spawn here, we had to run logistics because we had battle tanks and they require a lot of logi to run basically. So this had to be taken out first. And after that, the route that was taken was green route, which meant that we were gonna maneuver here this way. So my objective for the recon guys was to make sure that this screen, this red line here, was set. We established all the watchtowers, which meant that the wardens were not going to be able to flank us without any forewarning. They couldn't get into the ice lake here from this off-road here or here. We made sure that we have watchtower coverage there. And we also held station keeping basically on this flank here on the west and on the north. That way, because of the limitations of map intelligence, when a vehicle contact pops up, you still need to identify the contact. It could be a jeep or it could be an outlaw. On the map intel don't tell you. That's why the visual scouts need to go out there and do their job. And we did, we did it extremely well. We did it so well, in fact, that enemy logistics on at least 2 occasions just ran right into the armor column because nobody knew we were here. From the initial attack itself, for the first at least 3 to 5 minutes, there was no real opposition. It was only once we started knocking on the doorstep that the alarm bell started ringing and all the infantry started swarming in. So yeah, for the recon support guys, I'm very proud about how my boys performed. It was very, very impressive performance. We did our job. Cornered it off, knocked out all the watchtowers. In fact, at one point, because of the lack of warden watchtowers, we got the call that said that there was a warden watchtower right here north of Bleating Plateau, which, I was panicking at that point because like, oh no, we missed the watchtower. How could we? But what it ended up being our watchtower that was mistaken for a warden watchtower. The lack of warden watchtowers ended up spooking out some of the armor guys because they didn't see any. So that was great. Yeah, we had a lot of fun. Yeah, so that's how the recon support went. Can't find any faults in my guys or how it went. We definitely did our job. We definitely screened it well. And we actually even went beyond that because of the lack of warden response. No major QRF response was conducted into the area from the north, at least, which was my main concern coming from the north here. We ended up cutting logi into Callahan's gate here. I think we destroyed like 2 trucks at least. And we also destroyed a crane full of artillery that was coming out of Maiden's Vale towards Callahan's gate. So yeah, we went out, we provided the forward reconnaissance, and we also ended up cutting logi. very impressive tally for 6 men. Um, our command and control for the most part on recon support was pretty good. I was able to keep a good eye out and read the situation about where all my guys were. And the tank crew, Creed and Greg, they were very much on the ball because I ended up shifting them across. I had them attached to me to keep an eye on them basically because they were new guys. But I ended up not needing to do so because they understood what we needed to be done and managed to switch them around to different commands. So I managed to like attach them to uh, my second scout team and then back to mine, and they provided fire support for each scout team as well. So that was very good, very good. Uh, Basically, got to play Foxhole as like the strategy game, which a lot of fun for me. So yeah, that's how for the first part of the maneuvering that recon support went down. That's how we saw it develop. The armor column got up, knocked out Spitrocks, and then moved into position to attack Maiden's Veil. And somebody else, I think the 3380 guys, they brought up a CV and captured it. So we had some logistic, like a forward stockpile basically, at Spitrocks here later on. But yeah, moving on to the main attack. So, as the attack was occurring, like I said before, uh, recon support is just gonna be holding off the wrong color. Yeah, recon support was just gonna hold the perimeter line here and keep an eye out on any vehicle contacts which the watchtowers pick up. And in the meantime, our main attack. Let me get another color. This is awful. We'll just go with red. Never mind. The main attack started on Maiden's Veil here. So uh, I wasn't there, right? Because we were off on the flanks trying to keep an eye out. So I didn't know what was going on, and I wasn't there. I have since then reviewed footage of folks that were there. Um, but the way we saw it was we went in, and there was a good firefight for about 5 minutes or so. At which point, then one of the infantry started pouring out of the town base and counterattacking. And we lost a couple of tanks, I believe, in this position here, which then forced a retreat. And what we saw for the retreat, and I confirmed with the footage, was that we actually got chased by infantry all the way back to Spitrocks, which is, I mean, yeah, I'll just leave that statement there. Our tanks got pushed, we got chased back by infantry. I'm just gonna leave it like that. Uh, of course, I wasn't there, so if anybody wants to correct the record there, I'd like to know. I'd like to be part of that conversation and discussion. Uh, that's how we saw it on the map. That's how it played out, as far as I know. And once this happened, once we got back to Spitrocks, and I saw that one in infantry, because the watchtowers for the most part were still up, they did end up start taking out the four watchtowers that were in between this line here. So we started to lose vision here, and there wasn't much we could do as they started bringing tanks in, and we had to run around a lot. That's the recon support guys. Well, once one in infantry started pushing into Spitrocks, um, that's when I started panicking, and I made a pretty bad decision here. Red was the first one that pointed it out, so this is probably one of my biggest mistakes that I made here. Let me get the color again. Yeah, okay. We'll use blue for wardens because they're blue. So they actually chased on two flanks the way I saw it on the watchtower as it occurred. And we'll use red to represent our forces. Pull back the Spitrocks along this route here. Okay, purple. No, that's too close a color. And light blue. And oh, still can't see. We'll just have to make do with green. Means you can sort of see it. Fine. So anyway, so the initial screen that we had set up, what happened once this was occurring, I made the decision to just pull back because the things weren't going well at all. And to combat infantry, if we could get more more firepower into the area, that would be helpful. At least that's the way I was thinking about it. So we ended up abandoning our positions on the north here, the northern entrance, and in the lake basically. And we also started abandoning the position here, which we were cutting largely into Callahan's Gate, and we just pulled back into Spit Rocks. Oh, we did not take that route. That was no man's territory there. We had to go around the long way. Um, as Red pointed out, there was no real reason for us to abandon all the positions here, because we were still cutting pretty effective largely into Callahan's Gate at this point. Uh, so I should have kept my fire support and my second team there, and I should have just pulled myself back and tried to provide reconnaissance on the eastern flank here. Uh, yeah, that was my big mistake there. That once the retreat started happening, I should have shifted over to the east, because I do believe that the Wardens ended up bringing in some partisans down on the southern road out of Maiden's Vale here, and I think there was an ambush that occurred. So this was probably the big failure here. But I didn't quite understand what was going on. Other than that, we were pulling out to retreat the Spit Rocks. I was under the impression that we were just gonna refit and resupply, and then go back and hit it again. But that didn't happen. So from a recon support view, that's how we saw the battle unfold. Oh, I've already covered that. After we got the Spit Rock, we just pulled out, hit back to Loggerhead, and then back to the fob. So I'm not going to talk about the Saltbrook battle because I don't think it really warrants a full after action report. Uh, this was the main effort. It was the initial target. So what happened after the Battle of Saltbrook? So basically, about 2.5 hours after we had hit Maiden's Vale, I went back on a solo recon mission to Maiden's Vale to do the target assessment. And it does not look pretty, folks. I can't put it any other way. And this goes back to one of my first points I stated at the very beginning of the video. There are certain defenses that you have to hit that if you do hit, have a long-term effect, and there are some which you hit that don't have any consequences really. For the most part, the only thing that I always prioritize and always try to tell people to keep in mind is that tier 3 bunker bases at this point in the war, if you destroy, very good chance they're not coming back. Everything else, on the other hand, for example here, that we put the garrison houses and pillboxes, these can be rebuilt very easily. And in this case, just as I went back 2.5 hours after, all the garrison houses were all back up. The pillboxes weren't. But for those who do understand how the building works, pillboxes are very easy to redeploy. They don't take that much effort, and they don't take that many materials either. The only tier 3 bunker bases which I was able to identify that we destroyed were housing garrisons. And quite frankly, if we keep in mind how everything has played out so far and how the strategy has been, that in my mind has been laid out, the best way that we should approach it. Since we are basically an armor group, majority of everybody a part of this endeavor and the operations before and probably the operations after this, it's all armor group, which means that the garrisons, they're not a priority to us. Howitzer garrisons are concerned if we're an artillery group of some kind, because these are the counter battery fire. When we roll up the heavy artillery, these are the threats that are most likely to affect them. It doesn't affect us. Our main concern is always the anti-tank capabilities of whatever kind of defenses that we're running into, and we didn't actually hit out any of them. At Green Route, I did mention that there was only one AT garrison covering that entire flank that really, if we knock that out, we have a pretty good shot at trying to get into the main town. That was not fulfilled, however. The attack didn't go that way. Once again, up for debate and discussion for that, if anybody wants to talk about it. But yeah, this is basically all the damage that was done. It doesn't match up. The amount of firepower that we brought to bear on this one target does not match up with the amount of damage we actually ended up dealing to the enemy. Um, regarding the attack itself, um, there's one point here that I forgot to put was the night aspect. Operating tanks at night is always very, very risky. So probably should have waited an extra cycle. But there were a lot of other factors which I think were far more important that occurred. The first one always being it's a multi-regiment operation. So we had like at least 6 regiments show up, and they were all different groups, about like 3 to 5 players each here and there, all came in and whatnot. Um, for the folks that I brought in, that was Orcs and USMC. I made sure that I told them that I was doing reconnaissance and intelligence. You need to ask Godfather what the main armor plan is. If anything is not clear, then you come to me and ask me what's the problem or what you need to know, basically. That's what I made clear to both the USMC and Orcs. For USMC, I'm not too sure how things went because I haven't actually had the chance to talk to them about what happened here. With the Orcs fellas, we did identify that the point man that I was talking to, he didn't actually relay the information to his tank crews. So that was like four to five people there that didn't quite understand what was going on. But it wasn't just them. After watching the clip, there were a couple of folks that were asking, as the attack on Maidensville was being conducted, what was the objective? Now, if our guys don't know what the objective is when we're already behind enemy lines and attacking them, something has gone terribly, terribly wrong. Um, I'm not sure how. I mean, the reason why all my briefings and intelligence reports are very detailed is to make sure that everybody has the information. And as I said before, I can't give the briefing all the time to everybody every time that we're going to have extra group come in or every time that we're going to like change a target. Uh, I'm betting on the fact that all the regiment commanders, which is what I assume to be the most important people that need to know, we're going to filter down the information. But as far as I know, the majority of the tank group that ended up going into the attack didn't even know what they were up against or what they were trying to do. That is a very big cause for concern here. That was a very big factor as to why things, as far as I can tell, went wrong. Because once again, I'm not really gonna touch upon it. Well, I guess I have to. The last point here was the final attack there. Um, the only point I can raise here is that each weapon system has strengths and weaknesses. No one weapon is completely overpowered. At least in this game, from my point of view, it's quite well balanced. It's not like other games, like certain RTS games, like Company of Heroes, for example, the certain tactics which you completely gamey that you can spam one unit and totally win the game. There are instances in games that have mechanics which aren't well balanced that turn out like that. But in Foxhole, for the most part, each weapon system has its own strength and weaknesses, and if you combine all the different weapons, uh, you have a unit that is very, very strong, very, very powerful. Uh, that only works if everybody understands what each weapon can and cannot do, and what its role is in the force that we are operating. Um, that's the big thing that the only point that I can raise as the outsider, because I wasn't there in the initial attack, that from what I saw, uh, that I think needs to be talked about really. Oh, okay, so yeah, I think I've come to the end, and I don't think I've missed out anything. Oh yes, okay. So one last thing about the failure of communications here, the lack of people understanding what the objectives was. I also forgot about this, which was interesting because I'm always the person to raise this point. Is that there's no point in conducting a major attack if you don't tap the target. Tapping the target is important because you reset the tech and the base upgrades. If you do that, you set back the enemy days of progress and work. That's why tapping is very important. And I should have raised this that because this happened before. I asked the question as we were just outside Maidensville, where is the CV? Now this gives me this implies to me 2 points really. One, that once again, failure of communication. People didn't quite understand what we were supposed to do there. But two, the folks that I did inform, particularly the regiment commanders, either didn't prioritize the importance of tapping the town base, in which case then there was no way this attack was ever going to be successful because we didn't have a unified effort to a single objective at that point because we didn't even bring a CV up. What the plan was that I heard as Godfather explained to me was that we were going to build the CV afterwards. We don't have the time to do that. If you're going to go in to attack, you got to go in, hit the target, and then tap and then pull out. There's no time to stay on site because, once again, this is an armor operation. Infantry is going to be there. We can't stay in an urban environment with infantry for very long. The CV needs to be on station, on point, so that once the opportunity arises, you go in, tap, and then we pull out. Game over. Um, and this is not the first time that this happened. The way I see it is that the CV is always an afterthought in all the operations which we are conducting. The CV should never be the afterthought. The CV should always be the first thought. It is the one unit in which everything else is built up around. All right, you start with the CV, you then move on to logistics, and then you start filling in all the combat roles from that. That's at least the way that I've approached the game, and it's paid off for some time. And this is what the last point I suppose just going to raise here. The way that the force composition has always been built up, I feel has always been the wrong way. You start with the objective, you figure out what the main weapons you are that you have available to achieve that objective, and then build up the force around that. That's usually how I approach my war games. But once again, I'm open to discussion and debate on that. So if anybody wants to talk about it, just DM me. I'll